Hey, welcome back to chapter 16 of Momo. Hope you're enjoying it, and please do share it around with friends and family so that more people can join in the story, because I think this is such a great story and should be listened to by more people. Okay, are you sitting comfortably?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah? Well,
Yeah.
hopefully some of you are sitting comfortably. Bring friends and family to get more comfortable, and if you're still not comfortable, then hopefully listening to this will help you to feel more comfortable. Here it goes. Loneliness. Where to? Asked the chauffeur when Momo got in beside him. She looked perplexed. Where did she want to go? She had to look for Cassiopeia, but where? Where had she lost her? The toys hadn't been with them on the drive to the airport. That much she knew for sure. So the likeliest place would be outside Guido's house. Then she remembered the words on Cassiopeia's shell. Goodbye, and to look for you. Of course, Cassiopeia had known beforehand that they would lose each other, so she had gone looking for her. But where should she, Momo, go looking for Cassiopeia? Make up your mind, said the chauffeur, beating an impatient tattoo on the steering wheel. I've got better things to do with my time than take you joyriding. Back to Guido's house, please, Momo replied. The chauffeur looked faintly surprised. I thought the boss said to drive you home. You mean you're coming to live at his place? No, said Momo, but I've lost something on the road outside and I've got to find it. That suited the chauffeur, who had to go back there anyway. As soon as they reached Guido's gate, Momo got out and started peering in all directions. Cassiopeia! Cassiopeia! She called softly, again and again. Cassiopeia! The chauffeur stuck his head out of the window. What are you looking for? Professor Horror's toys, Momo told him. Her name is Cassiopeia, and she always knows what's going to happen half an hour in advance. She can make words light up on her shell, too. That's how she tells you what the future holds in store. I've simply got to find her. Would you help me look for her, please? I've no time for jokes, snarled the chauffeur, and drove on. The remote controlled gate opened and closed behind him. Undaunted, Momo continued the search on her own. She combed the entire street, but Cassiopeia was nowhere to be seen. Perhaps she's on her way back to the amphitheatre, thought Momo, so she slowly retraced her steps, calling the toys by name all the way. She peered into every nook and cranny, every ditch and gutter, but in vain. Although Momo didn't get back to the amphitheatre till quite late, she searched it as thoroughly as the darkness would allow. She had nursed a vague hope that Cassiopeia might, by some miraculous means, have reached home before her, but she knew in her heart of hearts that the tortoise's slow rate of progress rendered this impossible. At long last she crept into bed, really alone for the first time ever. Once she had given Cassiopeia up for lost, Momo decided to concentrate on trying to find Beppo. She spent the next few weeks roaming aimlessly through the city in search of him. No one could give her any vague clue as to his whereabouts, so her one remaining hope was that they might simply bump into each other. The vastness of the city made this a forlorn hope. They had a little chance of meeting as little chance of meeting as a shipwrecked sailor has that his message in a bottle would be netted by a fishing boat 10,000 miles from the desert island where he tossed it into the sea. For all that, Momo kept telling herself she and Beppo might be quite close to each other. Who could tell how often she had passed some spot where he had been only an hour or a minute or even a moment or two before? Conversely, how often had Beppo crossed a square or rounded a street corner 1 minute or moments after her? Encouraged by this thought, Momo often waited in the same spot for hours. She had to move on sooner or later, however, so even that was no insurance against their missing each other by a hair's breadth. How useful Cassiopeia would have been! The tortoise could have signalled, "Wait, keep going." As it was, Momo never knew what to do for the best. She was afraid of missing Beppo if she waited, and just as afraid of missing him if she didn't. She also kept her eyes open for the children who used to come and play with her in the old times, but she never saw a single one of them. She never saw any children at all, though she was hardly surprised in view of Nino's remark about being taken off to care. Momo herself was never picked up by a policeman or other adult and taken off to a child depot, for the very good reason that she was under constant surveillance by the men in grey. Not that she knew it. Confinement to a child depot wouldn't have suited their plans for her. Although she ate at Nino's restaurant every day, she never managed to say any more to him than she had on the first occasion. He was always in just as much of a rush as and never had any time. Weeks became months, and still Momo pursued her solitary existence. One evening, while perched on the balustrade of a bridge, she sighted a small bent figure of a man on another bridge in the distance, wielding a broom as if his life depended on it. Momo shouted and waved, thinking it was Beppo, but the man didn't stop work for an instant. She ran as fast as she could, but by the time she reached the other bridge, there was no one in sight. "I don't suppose it was him," she told herself consolingly. "No, it can't have been. I know the way Beppo works." Some days she strayed home to the amphitheatre on the off chance that Beppo might look in to see if she was back. If she was out when he came, he would naturally assume that she was still away. It tormented her to think that this might already have happened a week or even a day ago. So she waited in vain. Eventually she painted the words "I'm back" on the walls of her room in big bold letters, but hers were the only eyes that ever saw them. The one thing that never forsook Momo in all this time was her vivid recollection of Professor Hora, the hour lilies, and the music. She had only to shut her eyes and listen to her heart, and she could hear the blossoms in all their radiant splendour, and hear the voices singing, and even though the words and melodies were forever changing, she found she could repeat the words and sing the melodies as easily as she had on the very first day. Sometimes she spent whole days sitting alone on the steps, talking and singing to herself, with no one there to hear but the trees and the birds and the time-worn stones. There are many kinds of solitude, but Momo's was a solitude few people ever know, and even fewer experience with such intensity. She felt as if she were imprisoned in a vault, heaped with priceless treasures, an ever-growing hoard that threatened to crush the life out of her. There was no way out either. The vault was impenetrable, and she was far too deeply buried beneath a mountain of time to attract anyone's attention. There were even moments when she wished she had never heard the music or seen the flowers. And yet, had she been offered a choice, nothing in the world would have induced her to part with her memories of them, not even the prospect of death. Yes, death, for she now discovered that there are treasures capable of destroying those who have no one to share them with. Just repeat that. Yes, death, for she now discovered that there are treasures capable of destroying those who have no one to share them with. Every few days, Momo made the long walk to Guido's house and waited outside the gate for hours in the hope of seeing him again. By now, she was ready to agree with anything, ready to stay with him and listen to him, whether or not things became as they once were, but the gates remained firmly shut. Only a few months passed in this way, yet Momo had never lived through such an eternity. No clock or calendar can truly measure time, just as no words can truly describe the loneliness that afflicted her. Suffice it to say that she had succeeded in finding her way back to Professor Horror, and she tried again and again. She would have begged him to cut off her supply of time, or let her remain with him at Nowhere House forevermore. But she couldn't find the way without Cassiopeia's help, and Cassiopeia, whether long since back with Professor Horror or lost and roaming the big wide world, had never reappeared. Instead, something quite different happened. While wandering through the city one day, Momo ran into Paolo Franco and Maria, the girl who always used to carry her little sister Rosa around with her. All three children had changed so much she hardly recognized them. They were dressed in a kind of grey uniform, and their faces wore a strange, stiff and lifeless expression. They barely smiled, even when Momo hailed them with delight. "I've been looking for you for so long," she said breathlessly. "Will you come back to the amphitheatre and play with me?" The three children looked at each other, then shook their heads. "But you'll come tomorrow, won't you? Or the next day?" Again the trio shook their heads. "Oh, do come," Momo pleaded. "You always used to in the old days." "In the old days, yes," said Paolo, "but everything's different now. We aren't allowed to fritter our time away." We never did," Momo protested. "It was nice," Maria said, "but that's not the point." And the three of them hurried on, with Momo trotting beside them. "Where are you off to?" she asked. "To our music class," Franco told her. "That's where they teach us to play." Momo looked puzzled. Play what? "Today we're playing data retrieval," Franco explained. "It's a very useful game, but you have to concentrate like mad. How does it go? We all pretend to be punch cards, and each card carries various bits of information about us: age, height, weight, and so on. Not our real age, height, and weight, of course, because that would make it too easy. Sometimes we're just like long strings of letters and numerals, like MUX763/Y. Anyway, then we're shuffled and fed into a card index, and one of us has to pick out a particular card. He has to ask questions in such a way that all the other cards are eliminated and only the right one is left. The winner is the person who does it the quickest." Is it fun?" said Momo, looking rather doubtful. "That's not the point," Maria repeated uneasily. "Anyway, you shouldn't talk like that." "So what is the point?" Momo insisted. "The point is," Paolo told her, "it's useful for the future." By this time they had reached a big grey building. The sign over the gate said Child Depot. "I had so much to tell you," Momo said. "Maybe we'll see each other again sometime," Maria said sadly. As they stood there, more children appeared. They screamed in through the gateway, all looking just the same. They streamed in through the gateway, all looking just the same as Momo's former playmates. "It was much nicer playing with you," Franco said suddenly. "We used to enjoy thinking up games for ourselves, but our supervisors say they didn't teach us anything useful. Couldn't you just run away?" Momo hazarded. The trio shook their head and glanced around for fear someone might have overheard. "I tried it a couple of times at the beginning," Franco whispered, "but it's hopeless." They always catch you again. You shouldn't talk like that, said Maria. After all, we're taken care of now. They all fell silent and stared gloomily into space. At last, Momo summoned up her courage and said, "Couldn't you take me in with you? I'm so lonely these days." Just then, something extraordinary happened. Before the children could reply, they were whisked into the courtyard of the building like iron filings attracted by a giant magnet, and the gates clanged shut behind them. After a minute, when she had recovered from the shock, Momo cautiously approached the gate, extending to knock or ring or beg to be allowed to join in, no matter what game the children were playing. She had barely taken a couple of steps, however, when she stopped dead, rooted to the spot with terror. A man in grey had suddenly materialized between her and the gates. "Pointless," he said with a thin-lipped smile, the inevitable cigar jutting from the corner of his mouth. "Don't even try it. Letting you in would be against our interest." "Why?" Momo asked. She felt as if her limbs were slowly filling with icy water. "Because we have other plans for you," said the man in grey, blowing a smoke ring that coiled itself round her neck and took a long time to dispense. People were passing by, all in too much of a hurry to give them a second glance. Momo pointed to the man in grey and tried to call for help, but no sound escaped her lips. "Save it," said the man in grey, with a bleak, mirthless laugh. "You ought to know us better than that. You know how powerful we are. No one can help you. Now we've got your friends. You're at our mercy too, but we've decided to go easy on you." "Why?" Momo managed to get out. "Because we'd like you to do us a little favour. Be sensible and you can do yourself and your friends a lot of good. What do you say?" "All right," whispered Momo. The man in grey gave another thin-lipped smile. "Then we'll meet at midnight to talk it over." She nodded mutely, but the man in grey had already vanished. All that marked the spot where he had stood was a wisp of cigar smoke. He hadn't told her where or when to meet. Oh gosh, meeting the men in grey at 12 o'clock at night. That sounds very scary. Join me again for chapter 17 where we can find out what happens. Hope you're enjoying. Take care. See you soon.